So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Telstra Connected Cycling series. It's great to see everybody joining us again this morning, wherever you are, joining us in the cold or in the heat of Queensland, right around Australia or right around the world. We're enjoying the impact this series is making on everyone who joins us, and thank you for the feedback online, in messages and on Facebook. If you can go on mute, that would be fantastic, because it's a little bit hard for Anna, one of our pro team, to hunt you down and put you on mute. So if you want to go on mute, that'd be great. We also want to thank the ASO for putting on the Tour de France this year, which is making a huge impact to our Victorian community. And it's an awesome way to be riding along, watching such an incredible race in France and breaking up the lockdown number 2 in Victoria. So thank you, ASO. So this week sees our 22nd week of staging this event and this meet up and chat. And I'd like to give a big shout out to our Telstra Connected Pro team of Sandy Woolley, Diane Hannon, Kurt Houston, Anna Mallon and John Pitchinen for all their hard work to making this continually happen every single Wednesday morning. We're glad you're enjoying it. This week sees a new addition to our format with the Tour de France update from Olympic gold medalist Scott McGrory. Scott will be providing his thoughts and professional insights into what's happening on the road and with the riders in La Grande Bouchelle around France. And that update will be landing in around about 40 to 45 minutes from now. So if you haven't watched the stage 4 yet, then this is a spoiler alert for you. I'll give you another heads up later in the chat with our special guest, so you can be prepared for that. And we're delighted to have Scotty joining us again and sharing his insights into the action over there in the big race. So speaking of updates, let's get our Telstra Connected Cycling event underway, as we always do, with a message from our race director, Sandy Woolley, who's coping well in lockdown 2 in Melbourne. Not Sandy.
Hey, thanks, Duncan, and welcome everyone again. Unfortunately, it will be a huffy and puffy update, and it will be quick because we are away and rolling. So for those of you in the game, stay close to me. When I talk about the bunch in the chat, top right-hand corner, you'll see all the blue dots. They look nice and blobby now. Let's keep it nice and blobby and give the benefit of the draft of the peloton to all of those who wanting to enjoy the ride. So again, yes, Duncan, thank you very much. I think today's chat with Kate Leeming is going to be a great one. I think the exploits of Kate really show what it is to be a hard undertaker of tasks in the riding. Makes the Tour de France guys look like wimps with the distances Kate has covered and the work that she's done. So it'll be a fascinating chat today. So we're coming up to the hill. I'm going to get huffy and puffy and try and catch a few up the groove. Enjoy the ride again, everyone. And thanks so much for your support. Just a big call out, jump onto all the social platforms we've got, LinkedIn, Facebook, and even in the Strava clubs we've got for Telstra Connected Cycling. Back to you, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And yeah, we're trying to build community through our socials in so many different ways. So wherever you might be touching on Telstra Connected Cycling, please support us in our socials. Now, this morning is no different than every other week that we've had. Over the past 6 months, Telstra Connected Cycling has connected and heard from so many inspirational Aussies, a German, and even a Kiwi, who have shared their passions and drive to be more, achieve more, do great things, and shine a light on situations we all should be involved in to make a serious change. And this morning is no different with Dr. Kate Leeming, who is an ultra cyclist and has climbed on her bike to ride some absolutely incredible distances. That's not, if that wasn't hard enough, it's in some of the most strife-torn and difficult parts of the world. Kate's drive is all about breaking the cycle for education in some of the poorest and least educated parts of the world. So her epic cycling is based in this aspect of impacting people and communities right around the globe. And we say good morning and welcome to Kate Leeming. How are you, Kate?
I'm very well, up and about, so you can get them right now, which is good.
Yes. Yes, very, very good. Well, I don't when I was getting ready for this interview, I actually didn't know where to start. You've performed so many epic cycles right around the world, and we're going to get to that. But how did this come up for you? Because you were a teacher and now you're a doctor of education. But where did it all kick off for you in terms of the cycling? Were you an avid cyclist? Were you a good cyclist? Were you a triathlete? Where did it really kick in for you that the bike was going to be your tool to make impact?
Well, it also started, I guess, I come from country Western Australia, and I was an all-round sports person, representing my state in 4 different sports. Just started cycling as just a way of keeping fit. to be honest. And then I really wanted to travel, but never had the opportunity till after uni, and went back to teach. And I hadn't really seen the world and didn't feel very equipped for teaching, actually, because I just didn't have those experiences. Had no idea what I could do on a bike. I went to the UK actually playing hockey for UWA, and after that stayed over, did a little trip in Ireland, and then little trips led to bigger trips. And over the space of the next couple of years, I did about 15,000 kilometres just as my personal exploration of Europe. And that was really where I discovered my passion for travelling by bike, and sort of just started to discover what I could do. And so I guess I really love the idea of bringing a line on a map to life. I really love the idea of in cycling, as we probably all know, being very connected with the people in the land, travelling by bike, getting somewhere under your own steam. And just the fact that I feel it gives a great perspective of how everything fits together, whether it's good or bad. And so those things really inspired me. And then, that's really how I started. And it was just, rather than taking a bus or a train through Europe, I actually designed my own journey and gained and grew in confidence. My family were a bit worried to start with. They didn't, understand. And I was absolutely fine. I was just wanting to discover more. So that was kind of where that started. And then I was planning my first major journey across Russia. And this was back in '93, and I met a guy called Robert Swan, who's a polar explorer. He's the first person to have walked to both the North and South Poles. And I was working in a health club in London. And I cornered him, and he's the one who really inspired me to take it to another level and really understand that there's more value to what I was doing than simply riding a bike. And so everything that I've done since then has always been sort of equating, trying to help the people or places that I travel through, and eventually using education, as that's where I started, as kind of trying to see where I can take that with what I do. So I'm always trying to find and use what I've got to actually, get better. I couldn't have imagined planning to cycle across Antarctica or cycling across Africa or those things at the start. It was just more after one journey, then I'd sort of my mind got bigger. My ambitions got bigger, and every single journey I do is kind of built on the one before, I guess. So that's kind of, roughly speaking, quickly how it started. So then my first big journey was across Russia. It was called the Trans-Siberian Cycle Expedition, and that was a 13,400 kilometer journey. First woman to cycle across the whole of Russia from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok, and aiding the children affected by the Chernobyl disaster. So that was at a time when Russia was totally changing. So previously you couldn't get permission to travel across the whole country. And there's 1,500 kilometers of swamp there, where in eastern Siberia, where we had to follow the railway line to get through. So, that was quite an adventure. And to see Russia at that time, when the whole country was changing before our eyes, was just amazing. I travelled with a British guy, Greg Yeoman, and we always had a Russian who came with us. Looks like we've lost Duncan, I think, but that's all right. I'll keep talking. And then after that, the next major journey was through Australia. And so that was a 25,000 kilometre journey. So it was kind of a personal exploration, because I sort of come from the southwest of WA. I travelled to other places for sport, but never really seen or understood how my own country fit together. And that was about education for sustainable development. So, that was quite obviously it was 9.5 months, and 7,000 Ks were actually off-road on remote desert tracks. So, unbelievable. Yeah, it was kind of, a brilliant way to discover my own country. That included the first bicycle crossing of the Canning Stock Route. I don't know if people know what the Canning Stock Route is, but it's up through the middle of the West Australian desert, 4 deserts, crosses 1,000 sand dunes, or roughly. It's 1,800 kilometres. long. So that was certainly the toughest bit of that journey. So that was, and I was visiting schools in remote places, talking at the schools of the air, remote communities, as well as cycling, usually about 130 days a day loaded would be kind of an average, but not on the Canning Stock route. But yeah.
Hey, so we call it ultra cycling, and you've mapped out, how you got started in London, meeting that explorer, him sort of like throwing down the challenge that you can do more, you can be more, and maybe you need to extend out your cycling. So we call it, the people of Perry Public sort of call it ultra cycling. What do you call it, Kate? Because you're the one doing it, you're the one prepping, and we're going to get to some of your preparations now for Antarctica and other places like that. But what do you call it? Do you call it ultra cycling, or do you call it ultra connecting, or what did you call it?
I call it expedition cycling because it's kind of like I started with a road bike, but then as I sort of wanted to get to different places, and it became a mountain bike, and it's sort of like, the cycling is one bit, but there's so many other things that I have to do to make that happen. For everything from getting the idea and the vision, and I spend a lot of time trying to think exactly and research, and it's kind of like setting up your own business really every single time. So there's so much there, and then getting those ideas, refining them, finding the sponsors always. That's getting to the start point is tough, and then. Often I'm not particularly fit at the start because I'm just exhausted. It might seem weird, but I'm often just working around the clock just to make it happen. And then I just have to trust that I'm healthy and build that fitness as I start. I'm not racing. I'm not. So I just have to feel my way into it. And over time I realize I can repeat 6 to 8 hours a day, fine. But I'm going at a pace that I can manage to be able to do that. And there's always, at the start, there's always sort of biting the bullet kind of thing. It's just have to tough through that. And I break my day up. I don't just cycle it all in one hit. I'll do 2 hours or 1.5 hours and have a break. And I'm stopping sometimes to take photographs, whatever it is. So I'm always just really motivated, by discovering new things on the bike. I love planning and then making it all happen. So. Yeah, and then obviously afterwards doing something with it, and during it usually. So there's lots of other things.
Absolutely. So when I look at your resume of expedition cycling, new term, thank you very much, well, the education continues. When you look at the breaking the cycling epic cycles that you've done breaking the cycle in Africa, you've done the Great Australian Cycle Expedition, like you were just saying, the Canning Stock route and the 3 deserts in Australia. You've done the Trans-Siberian Cycle Expedition, which was 13,400 kilometres. You did that in 5 months. The Skeleton Coast, which we want to talk about, and around Namibia, that was an incredible ride of 1,600 kilometres in 1 month, which is the entire coastline, and which is the pictures on that is just unbelievable. So you're doing, tens of thousands of kilometres. There's many people on the cycle who've done a little bit of this, say with our Tour de Cure rides, Melbourne to Sydney, Sydney to Brisbane, Newcastle to Noosa, and all these sort of places that the Tour de Cure has taken us, or the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation as well. So we've all experienced a little bit of what it's like to get up in the morning after 3 or 4 big days in a row, get on your bike, cycle, and go for it. Have you ever been caught out? Have you ever been caught out on all these rides to sort of think, I've bitten off too much here, the sand dunes are too big, the heat is too much? Have you ever got yourself into trouble, and what did you do to get out of it?
I guess I always have crises or mini crises at some point, and especially, say for example, in Africa, it's a 22,000 kilometre journey, it's 10 months on the bike. Usually about a quarter of the way through, where I've got so much more to do. And so in Africa, I'd done about 5,500 Ks. I was going sort of into the base of this massive wind that comes off the Sahara, filled with sand, called the Hamatan. I'd already had 3 gastros, and I was recovering. I had a chest infection from this thing, and I was just run down. And I was just, all the energy had gone. I was struggling to do about 13 Ks an hour. I was just exhausted. And so I think times like that, it's not like I've never said I can't do it. I've invested so much in these things that, and I've got sponsors, I've got supporters, I've got school kids following me, all these things. I'm just not going to give up. So I guess what I have to do is firstly compartmentalize everything. So, there I was thinking about the future. I was thinking about all these, cycling across the Somali plains. What is it going to be like to get to reach all these places that I wanted to see? And so it's all positive thoughts. Then I'm sort of bringing it back to just the end of the week or the next city that I need to get to, or the day or the hour or the minute, even just to get to the top of the next hill or the pothole. Sometimes stop, divert my attention. Also, get a song in my head that I like. I guess one of the things that really helps the most is sometimes just to stop and to look for the beauty in your surroundings. And I think that it's such a good, like you can look at a desert like the Sahara Desert or wherever it is, or I had the same issue on the Canning Stock route. And you can look at it and it could be like a godforsaken place, and you hear all these explorers saying, these are godforsaken places, but actually they're also really beautiful. So you've got to I focus on small things, and I focus on thinking, gee, I'm really lucky here. Like this is amazing. And sometimes I just stop and take photographs. There's not much to take a photograph of, but I just do that and I frame it. And I have that memory, and that photograph will remind me of what I was thinking at the time, what it's like. And really, it's always about focusing on how do you get through rather than the things that are going to stop you. It's good for COVID right now to think of that as well.
I think we can all take that lesson for COVID.
Just always focusing on that positive, and you can always find negatives. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm sure you know that, Duncan. But it's kind of like it's easy to find negatives, but I just flood my mind with positive thoughts. I'm always looking forwards. I've never wanted to give up, and I think another part of that resilience is really having done the research and the preparation first, and already accepting the kind of things I'm going to face. So that's just what it takes. You just have to do what it takes to get through. So nothing, I've learned to adapt. That's part of it. All the time, you have to be able to adapt. Some days you don't feel as good as others. So it's no good cycling in the red zone for ages, because then you're out for much longer. I had the same issue on the Skeleton Coast, last year. So never wanted to give up. It's just a way of how do you get through, I think, is probably the way to think of it.
Playing the head game, Megan sort of put on the questions, how do you manage a day where you lose the head game on an expedition? I think you just answered that. But let me ask you this, Kate. Do you ever get lonely out there? Because it's you, the wilderness, the isolation, the challenge in front of you. And you've just spoken about resilience and how you basically look at the natural beauty around you and think about the purpose, about the education aspect behind your drive and determination. But do you ever get lonely as a person out there?
No, not really, because I'm just seeing new things all the time. It depends on the type of expedition. It's whether it's supported or unsupported. The Australian expedition, for example, I did the first 4 months with a friend, the same friend that cycled across Russia with me, but that's all he could get a leave pass for. I did the stock route, was the only part of that was supported, because there's only one community that's 1,000 kilometres up. And it's like I understood what the conditions would be like. So, making sure we can get water and that kind of thing, and food. So, and then the rest of it, the last 14,000 Ks, I actually did, 12,000 Ks, I did totally on my own. And I never, it was great, I could, it takes a little bit more, there's no one to get you up in the morning or anything like that. But all the way down the West Australian coastline, I have some connections and stations. So I was just cycling to one station, and they'd welcome me, bring me back, I'd have a great meal and stuff. They'd put me on the road again the next morning, and they'd phone down to the next station 100, 150 k's down the road, and I'd do the same. And so I think I only had to camp wild 4 times. The rest of the time, we just had this incredible generosity. Once you get inside, once people understand what you're doing, and often, you know, they just like you as an interesting person. So Africa was supported because we were filming it. I have not really felt lonely, but I guess sometimes, even with the support team, if I'm the only cyclist and they're all doing different things, like there's a driver or there's a filmmaker or whatever, the experiences are really different. And I guess almost the hardest thing probably of the African expedition was actually the team, was finding people. And it's a 10-month long, slow burn. And I had one amazing driver who was experienced, and he was the right person whom I employed. And he did everything for 1 month, and then he never wanted to go into Somalia. I had to have a different plan for that. But he was so reliable, so experienced. He was brilliant. And one of the cameramen, but some of the others were, you know, it was tough at times, and I was sort of trying to manage them, but I was also on the bike and going through the mud or whatever, you know, across the tropics or whatever. So I found that kind of thing, and even in other expeditions that have been supported, that teamwork's difficult, not because they're bad people, it's just that you know, it's a bit boring if you're in a vehicle and you're just waiting for me or whatever, and some don't have the ability to do other things or whatever. So
we'll have the patience for it, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm limited by budget always. So sometimes in the past I have been, for sure, and so you've got to find people. It's very difficult to find people who can commit, whom I can't really pay apart from expenses. You know, so when you say lonely, it's more like I'm having to sort of lead a team when I'm the one doing a load of the work, and I've got to sort of get off the bike and you know, I'll still help carry the water or do whatever, put the tents up, and you know, it's kind of trying to. I don't feel very lonely because I guess I'm there for a certain amount of time. I've already accepted it. I come from a farm, a wheat and sheep farm, where our nearest neighbour's 5 kilometres away. I'm used to entertaining myself in my mind, and I love people as well. So when I'm back in a different situation, that's fine too.
So when you're starting out on these expeditions, because all of that activity, as you're saying, you know, doesn't make you lonely because you've got a job to do and you're doing it, and you're doing it unbelievably well. And you know, when you're talking about tents and you're talking about sleeping wild and you're talking about the dangers that you faced in Africa from going from border to border with armed guards and armoured vehicles, and they even provided you with a gun at one stage that you had to use a gun, not to use a gun, you had to carry a gun. Sorry, you didn't use a gun. I'd use a gun on myself if I was out there. But you know, they provided you with a gun. All this expedition, all this adventure, you know, it doesn't go anywhere without the bike. And so how long did it take you as you started out this expedition journey for yourself up to the, you know, the person we see you today who's accomplished so much? How many bikes did you go through, and what bike did you start with to arrive at your fat bike today? Yeah,
I'm not a very technical person. I kind of chose bikes just to do the job that was required. So when I first cycled through Europe, I had a touring bike, which is actually a road bike. It was quite a small frame, and it was, I can't even remember what it was called. It was an Evans, I remember that. So I bought it in London. Then the others have all been just normal standard mountain bikes, and as simple as possible, because in going to places that, you know, we're not going to get spare parts, we've got to keep it, you know, I'm not a very technical person. So they're just strong, simple. I don't use any suspension or anything like that. Good tyre selection. So if I'm going on bitumen road or gravel road, I can have much faster tyres. So generally, like with Australia and Africa, I mean, I got some nice sponsorship from SRAM just for the parts. So going through mud or sand, obviously it's not great for the bike. So, you know, things can break down and wear out. So just by having an average but good bike, strong bike, I think one was a Giant XTC3 at the time. I mean, they've got to carry load. I had the wheels hand built because they're things that can break, and I've broken spokes and had to fix them in the middle of nowhere. Strength, simplicity, good tyres, change of parts. Don't need to be looking for racing, extra light, because there's no point. I need strength and reliability. When it came to the bikes for Antarctica, I guess what I was thinking of, anyone who's cycled the Canning stock route since me has used a fat bike. I'm the last person to do it with a regular mountain bike. And it really changes the game. And obviously on the snow, you need to have good flotation, so fat tyres, as fat as possible. And then, so I was doing a lot of research trying to work out what's going to be the best bike, what's the best combination of bicycles to use. And because it's going to be extremely cold, what if, I need to get everything right. We have very little experience with the extreme cold here. So I started researching in North America, and I ended up finding this fellow, Steve Christini, who's based in Philadelphia, who'd made normal mountain bikes that were all-wheel drive. And then he'd gone on, hadn't been making bikes for about 10 years. And I contacted him and suggested he put his technology into a fat bike, because the idea of having better grip and flotation, that sounds like the best sort of combination for Antarctica. So, just by conversations, he trusted that, loved the challenge of building a bike for Antarctica, and that's where that started. And this all-wheel drive system's built internally with the frame. So each bike's had to be designed to try to accommodate the widest tyres possible, and that has been quite a challenge. So I've got 4 fat bikes. My house is I've overrun with fat bikes, and they're all sort of version 1, 2, 3, 4. The one you can see here is the one that should be going to Antarctica. So it still needs a new fork, in fact, to accommodate the widest tyre possible. The ones at the moment are 4.8 inches, so that's 12 centimetres wide. It's possible to get 13 centimetres wide, of which the rear can accept, the front can't at the moment. And then because of the journey that I'm going on with that, I've just done so much research and finding the best tyres. So V tyres make these white tyres. Can you, I don't know if you can see that.
I can just see it in the corner.
White tyres.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a certain compound that actually helps to shed the snow, because obviously they're big tyres, and if it starts picking up the snow, then that makes them really heavy, and you lose the grip. So just those kind of things, using the right tyre pressures, and that's really just about feeling, actually, and feeling the conditions are changing all the time, and so it's been an interesting road to learn how to cycle on read the conditions, and everywhere it's changing all the time with every pedal stroke, and trying to work all those things out. It's a different type of cycling again. So
absolutely, you're actually giving all the road cyclists listening in and watching the absolute chills when you're talking about a 12 centimetre tyre. Like, that's just cray. But so let me ask you this. Breaking the cycle is about education. You're impacting communities as you're going around, bringing education. So there's a real drive behind the effort and the distance and the meters and the expedition itself. And then you become a filmmaker to spread the word about education, to really push that education. You're part of the Duke of Edinburgh Award, which is all about education and impacting people around education around the globe. You do get grants from National Geographic and other people like this when you're doing your film work, hoping to sell it on and things like that. The Skeleton Coast documentary is some of the greatest pictures of cycling I've ever seen. You riding through those dunes on your fat bike is unbelievable. It's on YouTube, everybody. If you want to get on it, we'll share the links as well in the notes. What do you like as a filmmaker? Was that a difficult addition to what you were trying to do with the cycling?
I guess I think of myself as a storyteller, and when I design every expedition, I'm designing the story. I mean, so I'm designing a proper start, a proper finish, and all the things that happen. I mean, obviously things get adapted. And so when you're making a film, I mean, I'm just really recording it, and I'm not technically good with a camera. I'm sort of okay at filming the moments. But like I've employed, like for the Skeleton Coast, Kaz, he'll come with me again for other things. I mean, he's done a great job. And what I've learned over the years is that it's all very well to do these expeditions, but if you don't record them well and don't make anything of them, what's the point of them? And whether it's used for education or whether it's used, like we made out of the African expedition, the 10-month one from west to east, but we made the first film from that. And like, that's all a learning process. It's just as hard as the expedition, if not harder, to find the funding again, to find the people to make the films, there's so many working parts to it. And I can help produce, and I have done. And I'm still like I'm good at the bike bit, but I'm learning with the other things. But with the Skeleton Coast, I think between Kaz and I, we've done all right. And now that's being picked up by a UK producer, and he's loved the feature film that we made. And so now he's cutting it into a 4-part series for TV. We've got a global distributor, so that's exciting because that's the first time I've got a global distributor, for example, and hopefully that's going to lead on, make it easier for this time round and next time round, because these, you know, as I said, no one's taught me how to do that. I've just had to learn as we go, and try to find the best people I can to make things where I don't have the technical skills, such as editing or directing or whatever. So
you got some writing skills. That's the main thing. Hey, listen, Kate, what do you hope to, you know, what is your dream about the education impact that you're trying to make? What's the dream about, you know, breaking the cycle, that beautiful tag motto that you've got, breaking the cycle. What cycle are you trying to break?
Well, the way the breaking the cycle bit started was with Africa. And because I was looking at the causes and effects of extreme poverty and specifically related to education, but it was still, this tagline came out, breaking the cycle, for the name of that expedition, breaking the cycle in Africa. Play on words, of course. So after the expedition, I just decided to keep the breaking the cycle bit because it just seems to make sense. And the education now, the program's gradually evolving, and it's about equipping tomorrow's leaders, really, and helping them to make informed decisions. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And, you know, I've got an educator working with me as well, because I haven't really been in touch with teaching myself for a long time. So it's just, you know, getting other good people on board. Yeah, so we're making series of lessons. The films that we're making now will have also lessons attached to them. The end game, it's just I'm trying to grow my audience, really, because it's very difficult. Like, it's a different world with education. Getting teachers, they're pulled in so many directions to get them to pick up on the content that I've made. I have a few partner schools, and I have I've had UNESCO as a partner a couple of times. Now I've got an organisation called Beluga that's got this really incredibly interactive platform, and I've been making lessons now for that, and that's in the future where kids are going to also, or classes can follow what I'm doing and take part in. I'll do the weekly updates and shows, and I do blogs as well, so they can follow all of that, and there'll be lessons, you know, groups of lessons that the teachers can elect to do. So I often speak with schools as well, do a lot of speaking. So yeah, it's just trying to use everything of my experience and try and pass on what I learned, which I think has applications for everything. You know, we just talked about resilience, and we've talked about we haven't talked much about risk mitigation yet, but just everything, innovation. How do you create your own project? How do you get the ideas? all of those things. Building empathy. I've got lessons on building empathy, on perspective, global perspective. There's lots of areas that it can go to.
It's also not just about, you know, the African nations or the Russian expedition, or, you know, you've done so much with our Indigenous communities as well around this education impact. And it's something at Telstra that we've got a very, very proud history about, trying to make impact into our Indigenous communities and with different programs and different support. And you're doing that as well. And it's something very, very close to your heart, like everywhere you go on your fat bike around Australia. You seem to have these wonderful opportunities to really impact our Indigenous communities through Breaking the Cycle and other sort of programs that you're running.
Yeah, when I did the Great Australian Cycle Expedition, which was 2004-05, it was more than anything a learning experience for me, because I hadn't realised you get a bit of a shock when you go out to see some of these communities. So it was. I spoke at some of those communities at the schools, but that was really, I was just learning. And even recently in 2018, I did a fat bike journey down the world's oldest river, the Finke River in the Northern Territory. One of the most incredible, small but incredible expeditions I've done. And I spoke to the kids at Alice Springs and met some of the communities there. It's really, for me, it's the best I can do really is tell stories, and using the bike and using the stories that I can create from these expeditions is a great way to then educate and open up topics. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do there. I haven't really raised, it's not really about raising money, it's more about raising awareness, and if people are aware of what's happening, they're in a position to make better decisions. And certainly there's a big gap in this country. You know, it's been very topical lately, which is excellent. And I guess when I travelled around Australia, I sort of suddenly became aware of how my own education was so blinkered. Because, yeah, like when you find out what really happened, and it's no, we weren't told that, we weren't taught that. So just you know, I can add my 2 cents worth in there too. That's good.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, I love the way you talk about short expeditions, still thousands of kilometres, but short expeditions to large expeditions. Hey, when we're talking about expeditions, you're getting ready to go to Antarctica on that fat bike behind you. You talked about a little bit about risk mitigation. We haven't really got onto that and gear and everything like that, but we're probably going to run out of time. But just hold up your boot, just to give people who are gear junkies a little bit of an idea in terms of what kind of apparel you wear. Talk about risk mitigation. Tell us some of the risks that you're going to face down in Antarctica and how these boots, bikes, gear comes into play.
Yeah, obviously Antarctica, well, you can't just go to the shop if you've forgotten something. So you've got to be able to be really well prepared. The wind chill factor, I mean, it could be from -20 to -40. The hardest thing, I mean, I guess I'm sort of helping pioneer what to wear in places like that. I mean, it is all possible. There is equipment out there. The biggest problems I have is keeping my hands and my feet warm. I'm a hot climate person, so for me to adapt, and the key is to keep the wind out in particular. It's not, you know, and obviously keep the cold out. So, so the boots, these are the best possible for cycling. They are cleated, which is good. Sometimes I haven't got out of those cleats quick enough and it causes a few accidents, but it doesn't really matter in the snow. It's fine. I prefer to hang on and be attached to the pedals than not and fall off a few times. I just prefer that. So I don't mind looking stupid. So the other risks, so hands and feet, keeping the blood flowing to the wrists, to the hands. These are handlebar mitts, so they fit over your handlebars. Hands go in there. It's like a big pouch. So that with a few layers of gloves, not gloves, actually mitts. I've got more here. That's sort of the outer shell. So it's a matter of layering systems because I get very hot, but you've got to keep the wind off. So all these have vents, so I can, and I've attached, where am I? Attached just things that I can actually pull with mitts on. But yeah, the venting's very important because it obviously is as hard a work as it gets cycling in snow. It's only about staying upright. It's trying to keep in a very low gear and just trying to keep the legs moving forwards. It's not about pushing anything big at all. It's just trying to stay upright. That's where all the energy is used. It's much harder than skiing, for example. You're using a lot more energy. Some of it, there'll be little bits that probably won't be cyclable. We'll just work it out as it comes. The conditions will change all the time. So I'm doing the expedition supported because there's just absolutely no chance of me carrying what I need to carry on a bike across that kind of terrain. And plus wanting to be able to communicate regularly. You know, I understand my limitations and I want to be able to work to my strengths. So, you know, I'll have just the one vehicle, which has got my filmmaker and a driver and one other. I'm not sure who else that'll be yet, and myself. And that's it. So simple.
Well, whether you're supported or not, you're the one having to do the pedaling and the legs and to getting the gear right and to stay safe and to stay hydrated. It must be just like a Meccano set of organisation on a daily basis. What's the distance you're going to be trying to achieve across Antarctica?
So there's a couple of options. The minimum to technically cross the continent is 1,800 kilometres, and that's just land to land. If it's really dependent on budgets and what I can get, but I prefer to really start from the real sea if I could. The Americans have a kind of a road that they use to join up their base at McMurdo on the coast and the South Pole. And so I'm going to follow that. There's no reason why I shouldn't. So they 3 times a year, they have a big convoy. So it's just where their heavy vehicles with all the fuel have driven over. So that should make it a bit easier, that part. Then on the plateau, the real issues are with the sort of bottomless snow. That's the thing, the biggest worry. Sastrugi, my bike eats it for breakfast. It's like it's and then yeah, coming down the other side, there's a blue ice runway and a sort of a camp off the Ron Ice Shelf, sort of just where the Antarctic Peninsula comes down. So that's near Hercules Inlet, a place called Union Glacier. So if I did the whole thing to there, then it's the Ross Ice Shelf adds another 1,000 kilometres onto it. So it's yeah, it's just a matter
unbelievable
of breaking it up. So pacing, I'd prefer to have a go at the 2,800 if I can, but it just depends. I'm going to be thankful to actually get there. So we'll see. But yeah, it's the whole time with Antarctica, if you're going towards the South Pole, you're going into the wind because the main winds, the katabatic winds actually fall off the continent. And I don't know if people realise that Antarctica is actually the plateau's at almost 3,000 metres. So a lot of the cycling is done at altitude. In the cold, it exacerbates that altitude.
Oh yeah, just to throw something else on it. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
So 3,000, they say, feels more like closer to 4,000. Hence, I've been doing altitude training as well.
Oh. Why not? Why not? Well, you're an amazing person, Kate. Like, it's just been so fascinating to hear from you about all your adventures, not just in this country with the 22,000 kilometres around Australia, but also the thousands of kilometres that you've gone out there and the impact you're making with education and your drive and determination to speak about education, to make people aware of it, to get supporters involved and things like that. We hope that you get to Antarctica with plenty of money in your pocket with the 2,800 kilometres on the agenda.
Yes.
There's some of the marketing that we've got. People can find you all over the internet, all with your documentaries. Good luck with your filmmaking And we hope that you and your fat bike. What's your fat bike's name again?
Oh, I don't really have. That's just number 4. I should give it a better name.
Yes, you should. Because you're going to intimately know it by the end of it.
Yeah, the number 2 now is kind of has a great story to tell though, because it's the only bike to cycle in northeast Greenland ever. It's the only bike to cycle down Australia's Finke River, so that's never been done before. It's the world's oldest river, and it's the only bike to cycle the whole of the coastline of Namibia. So it's kind of like this beautiful bike. I've got it's well used now, and that's my sand bike. So that's number 2 stays as the sand bike. I've got more.
I thought you'd after Greenland you'd call it the Viking, but how about we run a naming competition for bike number 4 for you? The Telstra Connected Cycling community will run a naming competition maybe on our socials over the next couple of weeks and see if we can come up with a great Antarctic name like Snow Bunny or something sophisticated like that. If we got your permission, we'll run that over the next couple of weeks, Kate, and we'll keep connected and keep supporting everything you're doing. You're doing an amazing job. You're an incredibly inspiring Australian. Thank you very much for joining us on Telstra Connected Cycling. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks
worries.
Got a captive audience here.
yeah, and hopefully lots of support will come out of it as we keep on promoting your Antarctic preparation. So thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're coming up to the last minute of your ride. I can see everybody is not as huffing and puffing as Sandy Woolley, our race director. But now we're heading over to France for the Tour de France update with our Olympic champ, Scott McGrory. I think it's four stages down so far, Scotty. Thanks for joining us, and thanks so much for joining back into the Telstra Connected Cycling. I think we spoke to you as a guest in around about week number 6, and you shared an incredible story of your gold medal triumph and everything that was going on with you. Now we've got you in as a captive expert. What have you thought about the tour so far, mate?
Well, firstly, good morning to everybody, and again, good morning to Kate. I have heard Kate speak before for the cycling executives, and still fascinated by just her tenacity and strength, mental strength and willpower, etc. Everything that you've gone through, Duncan. Congratulations and good luck to her on the next project. Had no idea that the plateau was at 3,000 metres. There's something I learned just there at the very end. Look, the tour, it's already been really interesting, and a lot of discussion around how difficult these opening 4 stages have been. What I haven't heard through the broadcast is why. Typically, the Tour de France, the first week is normally made for the sprinters, so you can mix it up and change the yellow jersey between different riders. Yet this year they started in Nice, and straight away they were into the hills. Stage 2 had some nasty climbs. Last night, stage 4 had a hilltop finish. The first time they had a hilltop finish for decades this early in the Tour de France. And quite simply, the reason for this is Nice, the town of Nice, paid the most money to have the start of the tour in their region. They want to have it for a couple of days normally so that all the spectators can come to Nice and spend all their money. Unfortunately, this year it's a little bit different, and that's not quite possible. But Nice is right on the Mediterranean. So anybody that has been there, they know that it's a beautiful spot along the beaches of the Mediterranean. But as soon as you go into the back roads, it's straight up into the mountains. So if you're going to hang around for a couple of days and have a few stages in Nice, you simply have to go into the mountains, into the north of in behind Nice. And that just means that the circuits that you put on offer in that region are going to be hilly. So it wasn't really strategic from the race organisers to particularly have a harder start this year. It's just simply where the start was means that they couldn't avoid going up into the hills for the first couple of stages. So look, it's been interesting. Got to be happy with Caleb Ewan, the Australian, getting a stage win. He missed out on the first stage, which was incredibly hectic for everybody. Wet roads, slippery, almost everybody crashed. So Caleb I think at one point he was 6 minutes behind on that first stage after a crash. He had to wait for a long time to get his bike changed from his team. Eventually got back on, just didn't quite get the sprint right after all of the effort that he'd already put in, and had a pretty poor performance by his standards on that first stage. But he's cracked it. He's got himself a stage win, which is great. Personally, there is a connection between Caleb and I, so I'm always happy to see him do well. I used to race with his dad. Now, his father was an under-19 national team time trial champion way back in the day. He's a year older than me, but I raced with him a lot. He was this skinny little kid that as juniors, as we were coming through, we could easily beat him in the finish of the young races. Then the next year, we started to do longer hills, longer climbs, and then he would start to attack us on the climbs, and then I beat him in the sprint. And then the following year, he would attack us on the climbs, and I would just hang on and then just beat him in the sprint. And the following year, he went into the army. So we never got to see how good his father, Mark, was. When Caleb popped up, it was, for me, it was, oh, of course. Nobody knew his dad because his dad, retired from cycling at 19 or 20 and went into the military. But I look back on Mark Ewan and think, oh yeah, that was a guy that really had potential that left the sport way too early. So yeah, great to have his son coming around. Although when I commentate on cycling and Caleb in particular, it makes me feel very old that I'm commentating on riders' sons, riders that their parents I used to race with. So great for him. And look, last night was as I said, the first hilltop finish. It was predicted to be a test of the riders that are going to go for the overall classification, but perhaps not particularly a real test of who's going to win. But that's what it turned out to be. Primoz Roglic came in as the Tour favourite, my favourite to win the Tour. He won the Tour of Italy, Tour of Spain last year. He's also finished fourth in the Tour de France in 2018. He was third in the Tour of Italy last year as well. So he's been up thereabouts. But this is a guy that's a former downhill skier that only bought a bike, I think, 8 years ago, made the transition very late to cycling, and is an exceptional talent. I guess all the talk was about Egan Bernal going back-to-back and winning for Team Ineos again after doing it last year. But Primoz Roglic in the lead-up races has shown to be, I think, the better of those two on current form. And current form, look, 2020 has thrown up so much. It means that these riders that have turned up at the Tour de France haven't had the lead up they normally have to an event like this. They haven't had all of the races that would get them going for it. So really, it's been about the motivation. Who can train the hardest? Who can get on Zwift and go harder than everybody else in lockdown, as a lot of them have had to do this year. And Primoz Roglic looks like the one that's really been the most motivated, perhaps one of the most talented, even if on paper it looked like Bernal was going to be the favourite, as the defending champion. But Roglic last night really did, didn't gain any major time on anybody else, but just the way it finished in the last sort of kilometre when he sprinted for the line, he just looked the best of all of those riders last night. So I think he's still the big favourite to go for the overall classification. But hey, look, there's so much more racing still to come. Julien Alaphilippe for the French is still in the overall race lead after he took that on the opening stages. Now, there is still a lot of discussion
just before you move on, Scotty, before you move on, I just want to talk about Alaphilippe. The French haven't won their own race for a long time. So what's he feeling at the moment? Because as you said, it's an upset tour. You've got to get in that position just in case the COVID thing shows up. Who's in the yellow is going to be who's in the yellow all up if it gets cancelled. This is a big day out for the French. The French must be getting so much on board, surely, with Alaphilippe. Oh,
absolutely. And can you imagine for how tough they've had it? The COVID situation in Europe was dreadful earlier this year. So for the French to have not won since 1985, for Alaphilippe last year to really just light the place up and really get a lot of popular people behind him from France, and then now for him to be in yellow during a COVID situation where there's not many spectators around, everybody's watching it on TV over there. So it would be very uplifting for the country, and that's the main reason that the race is on. It's the world's largest annual sporting event. The French government were desperate to make sure that it did go ahead, despite how I think they're having a bit of a second wave, starting to get a few more spikes of COVID in France at the moment. But I think it's really significant and important for France to have Alaphilippe in the lead. He won't take that on as extra pressure. He'll still just be trying to do what he can. However, he didn't look last night in the hilltop finish like he did last year. I think he's so good that he's in the lead, but I don't think he's quite as good as he was last year. So I think it's only a matter of time the longer the race goes on, I think we'll see Julian Alaphilippe go out of the yellow jersey. But for now, he's got a slender 4-second lead over Adam Yates from Mitchelton Scott. Roglic has gone up into third now at 7 seconds. But yeah, let's just see how it pays out. If there's a COVID outbreak within the Tour, then that's it. The race will be off, and whoever's in the yellow jersey will be the overall leader. And for the time being, it is a Frenchman that I guess it'd be the only time that the French would be hoping for another outbreak of COVID.
That's absolutely right. To get their first winner since 1985, absolutely right. That's sort of morbid but true. Hey,
yeah, the course itself suits. While Alaphilippe was great last year, 14 days in yellow, and he's back in yellow again now. But the other Frenchman that they're really looking at is Thibaut Pinot. He's a pure climber, perhaps more of a climber than what Alaphilippe is. And the course really does suit him. So he's the Frenchman that they were hoping might be able to go for the overall win this year. It's possible, but I think Bernal and Roglic, I think, just are better climbers. And there's a few other younger guys that have come along as well. With Pogačar, who's also from Slovenia, like Roglic, who was second on the stage last night. He looked fantastic, and he's only 22. And so he's another Slovenian. I don't know where they've come from. They're not a very strong traditional cycling nation, but they were first and second riding for separate teams on last night's stage. So some new names coming in the mix, which is also exciting.
Hey, so that's the names. They're the players, Bernal and these sort of guys. What about the teams, mate? Who's impressed you with the team? About the teams? Because after the first day, there was many teams missing riders straight away because of crashes, double crashes, triple crashes, and things like that. I think Ewan's lost a couple of teammates in his team already. Sorry, Caleb, I should say. So who in the teams is impressing you in terms of who stuck together and who looks the goods? It's only stage 4, I know.
Yeah, it's only stage 4, but yeah, it was just so hectic, wasn't it, at the start? Look, Ineos had one of their riders, Pavel Sivakov, who's sitting in last place now. He had a terrible first stage, and it's his debut tour. He's now last place at 1 hour and 6 minutes down. So that's how much time some of these riders have already lost. His was from crashes. But I think the next best place rider is only 1 hour and 5 minutes behind, just 1 minute in front of him. But this is how many minutes and hours the riders lose just in these opening stages. So Sivakov he's going to have to use a few more days to try and recover to be there for Ineos when he needs to be. They look pretty good during the stages, but at the end last night, Bernal was left on his own. Roglic, who his team, Jumbo-Visma, have really put in a lot of money and a lot of effort to buy riders to be ready for this Tour de France. They lost Stefan Kruijswijk before they even came in the previous event leading up to the Tour de France. He dislocated his shoulder, and he was on the podium last year. So he was going to be their third joker, I guess, or wild card for the overall classification. Third place last year. They've got Tom Dumoulin, who won the Giro d'Italia a couple of years ago. Despite having to, if you can remember, having to run off to go to the toilet right at the base of one of the final climbs, he still was able to get himself back into the pink jersey. And of course, Roglic. So they had this three-pronged attack. They were weakened before they came in. Dumoulin was okay yesterday, but he didn't show that he was really in the mix. So Roglic was isolated at the very top. But I think his team, Jumbo-Visma, still look as if they're the strongest. Interestingly, though, our team, Mitchelton Scott, the Aussie registered team, no Australians in the team this year at the Tour, as we've already heard that, but they have stated that they're there just to try and go for stage wins. Now, a couple of years ago, they were trying to go for the overall win, and they brought on the Yates brothers, they had Esteban Chavez, and it was all about trying to get a Grand Tour overall win. They've done that in the smaller of the Grand Tours. The Tour de France, they haven't. But in all of that, they told Caleb Ewan that he wasn't going to get a start in the Tour de France when he was riding for the team. So he upped and got out of there, left the team. He's gone to Lotto. Fast forward 2 years, he's now won 4 stages of the Tour, 3 last year, 1 this year. He's the favourite to win every one of the sprint stages. And yet his former team that didn't bother taking him to the Tour is now at the Tour looking and hunting for stage wins. If they kept Caleb, they'd probably already have a few by now. So it's interesting how things, the ebbs and flows of pro cycling and little decisions you make along the way can come back to bite you pretty heavily later on.
Yeah, no, we love it. Hey, listen, So stage 5 tomorrow. What can we expect, mate? What are you looking forward to?
It's down to be a sprint stage, but as you get deeper into the tour, then the breakaways become much more of a realistic chance to stay away, and it doesn't, I guess, happen as often as it used to back in the day, with everything so controlled now with race radios and everyone using their power data to understand exactly how much energy they can put out to bring back a breakaway, how much time they can give them, etc. It's all very calculated. But it does look like it's a set for the sprinters, and the sprinters don't have an enormous number of opportunities this year, so their teams will try to control it so that breakaways don't last too long and get all the way to the end. I think there's a real opportunity once we get a bit further into the tour for breaks to be successful. So it's another one mainly for Caleb, although it's not a straightforward sprint. There is, I think, leading up to the last kilometre, it goes uphill, not a real climb, but it'll be a hard finish. As we saw on the first stage, the pure sprinters got beaten by Alexander Kristoff, who is a sprinter, but he's a guy that's won the Tour of Flanders. So he's a real strongman type of rider. That's what the conditions of the rain on the first day, gave him an advantage. And it could be a rider like that as well. In a really hard finish in the last couple of kilometres with a drag up to that final K, that might be enough to really hurt someone like Caleb. But look, I think the pocket rocket from Australia is going so well that I think he's up for another stage win tomorrow or tonight.
Yeah, it's perfect. And you got perfect timing still, Scotty McGrory. That is perfectly on the nose for wrapping it up. Thank you so much, mate. That's a really, really great update. We look forward to speaking to you probably stage 12, stage 13 next Wednesday, and then we'll get you again before the end of the tour. And then we'll probably have a wrap-up too, because we love having you on, mate, so we're just going to keep tapping that.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Hey, look, just before I do go, I must mention, though, that we did have La Course for the women, which kicked things off in Nice. They had their one-day race. Great race that was won by Lizzie Armistead, former world champion. She beat Mariana Foss, who was a former world champion, and sitting just 2 places behind them was the actual world champion. So it was an incredibly quality field in the women's La Course race. And there's a lot of talk, if not confirmation, that there's going to be a women's Tour de France next year. So that's something to look forward to as well.
Great update, mate. Thank you very much for covering the pro women as well. Very, very important part of our cycling and our Telstra Connected Cycling. Thank you, Scotty McGrory. Well, thank you, everybody. We've run a little bit over time because Scotty is so good and Kate was amazing. So we want to say thank you very much for our guest, Dr. Kate Leeming, as well as Scotty McGrory, Olympic champ. And thank you for your time and your connection. Stay safe if you're in Victoria and right around Australia, right around the world. We hope you and your family are doing well. Stay connected with us again next Wednesday, where we're going to have another great guest. To the pro team that have staged this, can you please stay on the line? But I want to say thank you very much to the pro team for all their efforts during the week to make sure that this Telstra Connected Cycling continues pedaling. We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.